I'm Dr. Raysu, BJJ Black Belt and purveyor of pain relief and functional movement. Today, we're going to discuss and review the research on the most common BJJ injuries and why they happen. You're rolling, things are going well, your partner shoots for a takedown, you scramble, and then pop. Not an uncommon thing, right? Unfortunately, something in your knee pops you really didn't want to hear. And today we're talking about what actually gets injured in BJJ, the specific mechanisms that cause each injury, and crucially, why BJJ produces the exact injury pattern it does rather than some other one. Because the injuries aren't random, they're predictable, and that means they're preventable. The knee is the number one injury site in every study ever published on BJJ injuries. Every single one. The 2025 global study where showed 25% of all injuries. The Munich study 2021 of 1,140 athletes, 27.1%. 2019 Moriarty survey of over 1,200 practitioners, 20.8%. The knee is always number one, but why? Think about what BJJ actually asks your knee to do. Guard play demands extreme hip and knee flexion under load. Your knee isn't just bending, it's being compressed, twisted, and sheared simultaneously. Knee cuts and passing sequences create repeated valgus stress on the knee, on the medial collateral ligament. Takedown scrambles produce sudden, unpredictable forces in multiple planes. And then there are heel hooks, of course. Heel hooks apply rotational torque to the tibia while the knee is partially flexed, a position where the joint has almost no structural protection against rotation. The ligaments and menisci absorb forces the bones can't redirect. And that's why heel hook injuries so often involve multiple structures simultaneously, ACL, MCL, and meniscus in the same incident. The Munich study broke it down. Meniscal tears were most common at 65 cases, ACL tears and MCL injuries both at 36. These aren't minor sprains. Those are surgeries and 6 to 12 month recoveries. Critically, the Scoggin competition study found the knee was still the second most injured joint, even at tournaments where heel hooks were barred. The sport's basic mechanics are no. In training, the elbow is third. In competition, the elbow is number one. The 2014 Scoggin study found 38.9% of all competition orthopedic injuries involved the elbow. And the mechanism was almost always the armbar. The authors actually proposed the armbar be formally recognized in clinical literature as a sport-specific mechanism of the elbow. Hyperextension right alongside falling on the outstretched hand. The biomechanics are quite simple. When a competitor is caught in an armbar and resists, the training partner continues applying force. And where the elbow is designed to flex and extend, it has almost no structural resistance to hyperextension beyond a certain point. And then something tears, usually the anterior capsule in the front of the elbow, sometimes the medial collateral ligament on the inside, and occasionally it can cause a bony avulsion or where the tendon rips the bone up the joint. This pattern has been consistently documented going back to 2005. Nothing's changed because the mechanism isn't a technique problem, it's a cultural problem. The competitor knows they're caught, they resist anyway, and then unfortunately, ego can't override self-preservation. So the idea is tap early. That's the entire evidence-based intervention for elbow injury in BJJ competition. Sounds almost too simple, but the research has been saying exactly that for over a decade. Shoulder, ribs, spine, and hands. These are the next most commonly injured areas. Shoulder injuries are the second most common site overall, 13% in the 2025 global study, 14.6% in Munich. In competition, they climb higher because kimuras, Americanas, and shoulder locks are common finishing positions that place the shoulder in externally rotated, massively loaded positions. The most common shoulder diagnoses are labral tears, especially slap lesions from the kimura position. Rotator cuff strains from repetitive loading, overhead loading, and AC joint sprains from falls and being stacked. When it comes to ribs and the chest, they're the second most common non-orthopedic category, and almost certainly the most injury in the entire sports, because most athletes simply train through cracked or bruised ribs because there's no surgical option and rest is the only treatment. The pain gets normalized. Hands and fingers are extremely common in gi BJJ. The McDonald 2017 training study found them to be the most frequently self-reported injury location. Of course, constant gripping produces PIP joint sprains, pulley injuries, and collateral ligament damage, minor individually but cumulative over years. And lastly, low back injuries become more prominent with experience. Advanced practitioners spend more time in positions that chronically compresses and shears the lumbar spine, sitting in turtle, playing deep half guard, wrestling from seated positions. It's the price of technical sophistication, I guess. Before moving on, I want to flag one technique specifically because the heel hooks sit in a different risk category from everything else we've discussed. Most submissions, a loaded joint in its natural plane of motion, you feel pressure increasing and you tap. The joint survives, much like an armbar. Heel hooks are different. They apply rotational torque to the tibia while the knee is partially flexed, a position where there's almost no structural protection against rotation, and the pain often arrives after the damage. You can hear your ACL, MCL, and meniscus simultaneously before the pain signal reaches your brain, clearly enough to tap. That multi-structural injury pattern documented in the Munich 2021 study means surgeries and 6 to 12 month recoveries and elevated re-injury risk. And yet there are almost no published studies specifically on heel hook injury rates or prevention. We're operating largely in the dark on the most dangerous technique in modern no-gi. The practical rule, of course, have slow entries, have a lot of communication between your partners, and absolute respect for the tap, not because heel hooks are unsportsmanlike, but because the physics don't give you the same margin for error as other submissions. Here's a framing that the literature doesn't always spell out clearly. Frequency and severity are not the same thing, and they point to different prevention priorities. Hands and fingers are the most frequently injured body part in training, but they rarely require surgery or more than a week off the mat. In contrast, ACL tears, far less common, mean 6 to 12 months or more of recovery, potential long-term joint instability, and significantly elevated re-injury risk. The injuries worth worrying most about in BJJ are the low-frequency, high-severity ones, like knee ligament tears, labral tears in the shoulder and knee, and the cumulative spinal load that doesn't show up as a single injury event, but has chronic pain and early degeneration. So prevention efforts should match severity, not just frequency. That means protecting the knee above all else, especially in leg lock exchanges, even though your fingers will probably give you more daily grief. The pattern across all of this is consistent. BJJ injuries aren't random. They follow specific identifiable mechanisms tied to the sport's techniques and culture. Armbars cause elbow injuries when you don't tap. Heel hooks destroy knees when applied fast or resisted. And shoulder locks load the labrum past its limit. Understanding the mechanism is step one. In episodes 3, we'll cover who is actually most at risk and the specific factors that predict injury before it happens. Sources are in the description below. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. If you like this video and would like to learn more about BJJ injuries, check out my free 5-day email course on how to stay durable on the mat at the link below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.